Hi everyone, I'm Yusra Iftikhar. I'm a rising third-year DPT student here at Duke.
And I am Dashae Smallwood. I am a rising second year here at Duke, currently a first year.
Yeah, and Dashae, I know that we both have blogs that we've written. Mostly, I think we felt like there was a need to share information, right, that we liked about PT school that we had learned. And so we're just going to go through a few of the tips that we've picked up along the way and share those with you guys today.
Yep.
Dashae, what initially got you to start writing about PT school, like the admissions process in particular?
So I remember when I was applying, I didn't find that many resources online, and I wished that there would have been more to help me out. So I figured, why not help out other PT students since I'd gone through it, and it would be a great resource for them to have.
Yeah, agreed. I had the same sort of thought. I actually initially started my blog as sort of a way for it to be sort of an outlet for myself. I was applying to medical school at the time, and for me it was kind of a stressful process, and I think deep down I knew that wasn't for me. And so as I started applying to PT school, I started noticing a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of blog posts and things like that out there for medical students and for pre-nursing and pre-PA students, but not a whole lot for PT. So I felt like this was a great opportunity, since I was going through it in the moment, to just go ahead and start sharing what I was going through.
Yeah, and I feel like when I found your blog, I was like, oh, she's doing this. If she can do it, I can do it. So you kind of inspired me to hop on that PT help train.
And yours is a great blog.
Oh, so is yours.
Thank you. Did you interview for PT school?
I did not.
Okay.
At all. I only applied to one school, Early Decision, and they did not conduct interviews.
Why did you apply Early Decision?
So I heard that if you're really interested in a school, applying Early Decision is a great way to show the school that you're serious about the program. And I was serious about applying to Duke, so I was like, why not put all my eggs in this one basket? And the good thing is, applying Early Decision, you apply like a month or two before most regular decision applicants apply. So even if you don't get into the school that you wanted to get into, you're still ahead of the game for the rest of the program. So it was just a nice way to set myself up either way.
I actually did interview at one other school, and what's interesting about that process is I also applied to Duke Early Decision, which Dashae kind of described as you find out sooner. You apply if you know that you're really committed to going to that school, and the reason is that if you use PTCAS, which is the centralized application service, you apply Early Decision and indicate on there that you're applying Early Decision, and that service then locks you out of all of your applications to other schools that also use PTCAS. But what ended up working out for me, and the reason I was able to interview at another school, was because there was a school that did not use PTCAS, and there are several schools like that. And so it's important when you're applying to PT school to figure out, is your school even on the list on PTCAS, or are you going to have to fill out a separate application that's separate from that centralized service? So that application was actually due over the summer, the one that was outside of PTCAS. I then interviewed with that school and was accepted, which was an amazing feeling. But one other thing too to note is your school might be on PTCAS, it might not, but even if it's on PTCAS, that program may have an additional graduate school level application for you to fill out. And I know we got started talking about interviews, and so some schools do interviews, some do not. Some will change their decision on whether or not they're doing interviews, so it's very important to keep checking. And if that information isn't available online, or if you feel like the website for the school isn't being updated as regularly as you're checking, then I always think it's really great to reach out to admissions. That puts your name and your face out there even more. Don't bombard them with emails all the time, but I think that sending one or two a month just to check in and see how the process is going and how your application status is a pretty good idea. Yeah, and those are things that, I only was able to figure out because I went through that process and because I actually attended like a summer camp type thing at the other school. So I would have never known had I not actually been physically in their program for a week. And they were very helpful, and it was great to know that. But yeah, that's something that I hope that it helps for us to talk about.
Yeah. So what is your advice for students before the interview?
Before the interview. So this is assuming that you've checked to make sure that they have an interview, that you've been invited for an interview. My advice is, when you're going in the day of, I may have changed your question a little bit, but when you're going in, I do think the best advice is to be yourself, but I think it's to be the best version of yourself, right? So I'm someone personally who is very sarcastic, and I like to make a lot of jokes, and I think that humor is great in an interview, and it really shows off your personality, but only if you can kind of work it in a professional way. But before the interview, I would recommend definitely researching the program as much as you possibly can, and something that's really helped me a lot in the past is to speak with current and former students. Speaking with faculty is also great if you can get their email addresses and reach out to them, but sometimes going beyond what's just available on the website can be really great, especially if the website doesn't have all of the information that you're looking for. Another thing, that if you live close by or if you can get to the program and do a tour beforehand, it's absolutely not required, of course, but that's something that really helped me in my application and interview process, is to be able to go ahead and put my face out there and visit the schools and know what I was getting into so that I could talk about specific things going into the interview. And when you do that research, I think it's really great to go ahead and jot down some organized notes that you know you'll be able to look back at quickly and figure out what you were trying to say. So maybe not writing yourself an essay, but having some sort of pad folio or something like that where you can just say, like, great student lounge, great study abroad opportunities, things like that, so that you can bring that with you to the interview, so that if you are asked what you like about the program, or if you wanted to even work that into your conversations throughout the day to show that you've been doing your homework, I think that for me would be the most important thing to do before the interview.
And I would also say the school's website is a great resource. So look at their vision statement, look at their mission statement, because you want to make sure that you're applying to a school that aligns with your values. So make sure you do your research on the school and know about the school before you get to that interview and try to talk about the school.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, and this is getting a little bit more into the interview itself, but this is kind of a two-way street, and it is important to know that the program that you're going into, it may have a big name, it may have a great reputation, and that's awesome, but if it's not somewhere where you think you could be happy, and not just by the program itself, but where it's located, do you want to be close to family or friends, and is that program really far away, and are you okay with that? Is it financially the right, opportunity for you? Do you want to go to a school that's associated with a big sports team and lots of things to do in the area, or would you love to be more of like a country rural area? So all good things to consider, and we can get more into that as well.
Yeah, I would also say to make sure you know about the school's curriculum, because they can vary across programs. So like if it's 2 years didactic, 1 year didactic, 3 years didactic, just whatever the curriculum is, if it's hybrid program, make sure you know that.
Yeah, and the way to figure out, so we're throwing a lot at you, and so if you don't know if what a hybrid program would be good for you, if it all sounds like it wouldn't really matter what the curriculum is because everyone's a PT coming out of it, again, that's where talking to current and former students is really great. For me, to be able to talk to students about whether or not they liked a team-based approach, for example, to PT school, whether or not they liked having 3 years of didactic and having internships thrown in throughout versus having an entire third year of clinical internships. That was really important to me, and I found that students tend to be pretty transparent about their experiences because they want to let you know what they wish they had known coming in. So now we're at the day of the interview.
Day of the interview. What do you bring into your interview?
That's a good question. I actually have a blog post about this on my blog, but a lot of things actually. I think that so I always bring like a big black like tote bag with me, and that's really helpful because I can throw a lot of things in there. I personally, and I know people differ on this, I personally always bring thank you cards with me. I bring close to 10, which may seem like a lot, but you're likely to interact with a lot of people that day. And so what I do is bring blank thank you cards, and then I write down the names of the people that I've interacted with the most and something important from our conversation or something that they taught me that I'm really grateful for. When I did my interview, I left the interview, went to a coffee shop, wrote the thank you notes, and then I went back and gave them to the front desk to give out. And again, I don't think that's a requirement now, having gone through PT school. I think that thank you emails are great, But again, that's something we can get more into if we need to, but that's always something that I have on hand. I bring multiple pens because I'm very paranoid that one is going to run out, and I've had a few run out in the middle of a practical exam before, so never a bad idea to have multiple pens on you. I always bring, like I said, some sort of pad folio, so something where it closes shut so that not everyone can see like my chicken scratch handwriting the whole time, but something where I can have my resume in there, my notes that I took on the program before I came to the interview, extra paper so that I can take notes while I'm at the interview, and it shows too that hopefully it shows that I'm paying attention and actively listening as someone's speaking. I'm not writing the whole time they're speaking, but if they say something that I feel like I may want to recall later. Something else I have in there is a list of pre-written questions that I have for the program. I've always been taught that even if you know the answer to all of your questions, to go ahead and ask questions in the interview. That shows that well, for example, if you don't ask questions, the interviewer may not really know why you're not asking questions. So it may be because they did a great job of answering your questions and you genuinely don't have any, which is probably going to be the case, but it could come off as, I just don't care enough to really ask anymore. I've done my part of the interview day, now I want to go home. Some other things I always bring with me, I never bring gum because I know that I'm going to be tempted to chew it and not spit it out, but I do bring mints with me. I bring chapstick with me. I always have a water bottle with me, usually a small one so that I'm not being weighed down. I also always bring comfortable shoes, and that's something that I didn't really think about a lot when I was interviewing for other things in high school and undergrad, but you walk a lot, especially if you're going to a program site and interviewing there, and they give you a tour and things like that, and you don't want your feet aching to be distracting you from the conversations that you're having.
I would just say another thing to remember interview day is that the interview is a two-way street, so you are also interviewing the school. It's not just about them choosing you, you want to choose them as well. So make sure you ask all the questions you can to really figure out if it's the right fit for you.
And then one other thing too is you're likely going to have your phone on you. I have a smartwatch, making sure that those things are turned off. I don't put them on silent or vibrate or anything like that because, again, I'm pretty paranoid about it. I would much rather have all of my devices off than risk something going off, or even if only I can feel it on my wrist, that can pull my attention away for 0.2 seconds, and then I've lost my train of thought. So that's just something important too to keep in mind, to check your social media, call your mom, do whatever you need to do right before you get in there, but then from the moment you get in, make sure that your full focus is on that day. Now they're there, they brought everything with them that they need to, they're excited, they're ready, they're awake early in the morning for their interview. What is your biggest piece of advice for the interview, or for the interview day actually, and then you can throw in other advice as well, but what's like the one big thing that you either wish you'd known or you're glad you knew?
I would say to just relax and remain confident. It's a stressful process and you're going to be nervous, but the best thing to do is just put your best face forward and try to be as confident as you can, because it's only going to help you, not hurt you. So just know that you got an interview there, so you belong there. You have the credentials, you have what it takes, so just make sure you can show your best self to the admissions process, the admissions committee.
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice would be just to keep in mind that you're always being interviewed from the moment that you walk in. Again, like I said, if it's an on-site interview, people are watching you, and that may sound scary, but it can also be a really great thing, because in a one-on-one interview, you may feel a little bit more pressure to be a little bit more like good posture, giving all the right answers, but if it's an all-day interview, for example, if you're getting a tour, if you're eating lunch with students and faculty, that can be a time to relax a little bit more and really get the questions answered that you have, and just learn more about the process. Like Dashae said, have fun with it, but just remember that everyone there is interviewing you, not just the person in the room with you who's doing the one-on-one interview or the group interview, or whatever the format may be. That goes for all the students that you interact with. They likely will be giving feedback to their admissions committee. All the faculty members who are not on the admissions committee will likely be sending in comments about how excited they were to meet you and how just enthusiastic you were throughout the day. That doesn't mean you have to talk the whole time. That doesn't mean that you have to literally be smiling the entire time, but definitely have a positive attitude, show that you're excited to be there, even if it's not your top choice school. Make them think that it is, because you would want them to make you feel that way as well. So I know that you didn't interview for PT school, but what are some of the different interview formats that you've heard about?
So the main two are just like a single standalone like individual interview and then a group interview. So those are the only two I really know about. Oh, and maybe like within the group interviews, like a small group maybe of 3 to 4, or a larger group maybe of like 7 to 10, which can be. I found I'd rather have an individual interview than a group interview, because sometimes in a group interview everyone's like fighting to say like the best thing, and then if someone says what you were going to say before you said it, then you're like, wow, what do I say now? So I found group interviews stressful for like other things like jobs and such. But
so when we say group interview, Deja's talking about multiple students per however many faculty. And another thing too is you might be the only student in the room, but there might be a panel of faculty asking you questions. So that's another interview format to be ready for. Some programs will interview with multiple formats within the same interview. So you may have an individual one-on-one interview with a faculty member, and then go to a group interview where you're with 4 or 5 other students, and then you may be all interviewed at the same time, or it may be that you do some sort of group activity or problem-solving task, and again, you're being watched to see sort of how you communicate and interact with people. And that's one where I found that people do struggle with what Deja was saying about making sure that you get your best answer in there. I've sat in on some of those types of interviews where I've been watching students, and something that I think really works for students is to just be kind, whether that means sacrificing your answer for someone else's. That comes through, and that's okay. You don't always have to have the right or the best answer for every question or every problem that you come across, but just making sure that you're allowing other people to speak, and you can make a little bit of a show of that and say, oh, I'm sorry, you were about to say something. What were you going to say? I'd really like to hear it. Just little things like that can go a long way. Another interview format is instead of a one-on-one, I had a 2-on-1 where it was one faculty member, one current student. And so that was really great because I felt a little bit calmer having another student in the room with me, and it was actually a student that I had interacted with earlier that day anyway, and so that was very helpful. But yeah, I think those are the major interview formats that I've seen. I'm sure there are more out there, and again, speaking with current former students, speaking with the admissions committee and faculty can be very helpful in getting an idea. They may not tell you what the interview format's going to be. They may remain vague about it, and if that's the case, then that's okay. Just be ready to go in and show off your personality and what you know, and most importantly, why you're so excited to be a PT. One thing that I've realized through it not working out so well for me and it working out well for me later on is talking about things that I know I can back up. So for example, like Deja mentioned, it's great to read the mission statement and the vision statement for a program, but if I can't really back up why those are important to me or what they mean to me, then I might not bring them up. If I'm asked about them, then that is something that I should be prepared for. But for example, I wouldn't go into an interview and say, I just love the setup of the curriculum of this program. And if the faculty member or the student says, well, what do you like about it? If I can't answer that follow-up, then it's probably best not to even bring that up in the first place, right? And if the faculty member asks me, then it's probably either important to be ready for that question or say, I don't know very much about the curriculum, but I would love to learn more. What is it that you can tell me? What's your favorite part as a faculty member, student, et cetera, about the curriculum? And if you feel like you're a little bit at a loss, if you blank, then again, ask questions, say, well, what brought you to XYZ school? What is it about this program that made you stay? What are some of the activities outside of the classroom that you've gotten to participate in or that students get to participate in that they really like? So there are always questions to ask if you feel like you're getting lost or stuck or you're rambling. It's okay to take a pause and ask those questions throughout as well. It's possible that you may not have time for that. It may be that, for example, if there's a program where faculty members have a set of questions that they were going to ask you anyway, let them ask those questions. It's probably best not to try to delay the questions by asking your own questions, because that may not give them as good a sense of who you are, but if the opportunity comes up, then I think that's okay. That's something that I found is to ask throughout. But yeah, asking good questions, making sure that you can sort of back up. And it doesn't need to be that you have like stats on what you're talking about, right? But if I say, for example, that I really loved teaching Zumba, and a faculty member asked me, well, why is that important to you? I should be able to say, well, it taught me really important motivational and communication strategies. It helped me to get a better understanding of what health and fitness may look like at all different levels. And it's okay for me to say too that Zumba is just really fun and it's a stress reliever. I was asked in an interview once what I do to relieve stress, and I answered very honestly and said I cry. And it probably wasn't the best look, but the interviewer told me that they really appreciated that that was my honest response. And then I followed it up by saying, I let myself cry, but then I go do these other things, and then I get back on task. Yeah. But again, letting your personality show, I think, is okay. Trying to have all the perfect answers, I think, can not necessarily hurt you, but it does hold you back from showing who you really are. When I used to do interviews early on, like I said, in high school or undergrad, I used to do a lot of Googling of questions and how to answer them and the best questions to ask. And I think to an extent that's okay because it gives you a starting point, but relying simply on those then makes it very generic and takes out the entirety of you from that process.
I'm kind of going to go backwards, but okay. So interview, there's standard interview questions that you could ask in an interview, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, a time where you had to solve a problem. I would say having a general idea of how you would answer those questions before the interview could be helpful, not actually writing it out, but just knowing something you could pull on, or a situation you could be I remember when I had to do this. I think that's a good way to go in prepared, just because those are typical interview questions that are asked. So just knowing what you might say to a certain question is a good way to prepare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then something I wanted to speak a little bit about was body language. So even sitting here, it's hard for me not to fidget. It's hard for me to just look at the camera the entire time, right? And to look at you guys who are watching. But there is a certain level of expectation, and there's a certain sort of culture when it comes to interviews that I think is important to be aware of, even if it doesn't necessarily align with what you're used to or how you've been taught or brought up, for example. So maintaining eye contact is really important. You don't have to stare the person down or anything like that. It's okay to look away, of course, but looking down at your lap or at your hands the whole time may make it seem like you're not interested. It may imply too much nervousness, or it may make it seem like you're not confident or don't know what you're doing. Even though neither of those may be the case, it is important to make sure that you look at the interviewer, at the students that you're talking to throughout the day, at the staff who help guide you through the day. It's just one important thing to be aware of. Another thing is trying to maintain good posture and not moving around too much. I clearly like to use my hands when I talk, and some people get very animated because they get very excited and passionate, and that's great. Just be sure that you're not overwhelming the person, so maybe try to read their body language a little bit and match that. I have had interviewers in the past, though, come and sit on a couch or recline way back in a seat to sort of test me to see what I would do. So maybe don't mimic their body language if they do something like that. Hopefully that won't happen. But if someone does throw you off that way, then just maintain, Deja looks great. If you were to do what Deja's doing right now, that would be great for an interview. But that's just some things to know. If you are someone, for example, where English is your second language, that may be a point of anxiety for you. I know that I've spoken with some students lately who for whom English is their second language, and they worry that certain things that they say will come across as awkward because it's not typical slang, for example, that we may use, or they may pause for a long time because they're trying to think of how to say something the right way and in the right words. And so I guess too, if you're watching this and you are an interviewer, just to keep that in mind, that may be the case, and it may be coming from a student that you may not initially have that bias where they may struggle. So just keeping in mind that if they don't have the perfect body language, if they don't maintain eye contact the exact right way, if they don't say things in the most professional way, where in the way that we sort of define professional in the healthcare world, then to just have a little bit of not sympathy, but patience and understanding that cultural expectations and cultural practices may differ a lot across all of these students, and students may be coming from all different parts of the country and the world. And I think that's fantastic, and that diversity is a really important piece to having a strong class for a healthcare profession in particular, where you're serving all different types of patients. But just keeping in mind that the people may have sort of different expectations, even from what they've been taught. So in high school, I was taught that you should always shake the hands of every single person in the room when you go to interview. And we were sort of taught that with the expectation that there there would only be 1 to 3 interviewers. But if you come in and there's, for example, a long table in a conference room, and there's people seated all around it, it may actually make things more difficult for you to go all the way around the conference room and shake everybody's hands. So to just come in and say, hi, I'm Yusra, I'm so happy to be here, and then find another time during the day to shake their hands. If, again, going to cultural and now sort of into religious expectations and practices, if you're someone who doesn't shake hands, I think that some things that can be good are to have something in your hand and to do like a wave, or a lot of people put their hand on their heart to signify that they're really excited and pleased to be talking with you. And again, if you're an interviewer, just keep that in mind, especially if someone of the opposite sex does not shake your hand. It may not be that they're trying to be unprofessional or rude. It just may be something that's important to them. They're kind of strong.
Another thing that I wanted to mention is being able to adjust and
just like go with the flow.
Yeah, go with the flow during the interview day. And if something bad goes wrong, like not to dwell on it and not to think about it the whole time. Just try to put your best foot forward and move on from the situation and be able to handle whatever is thrown at you. And just to smile and be happy and show that you really are grateful that you are there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so that's something that I was going to address too, with just how to handle the entire day. Some interviews last 20-30 minutes and then you're out of there. Some interview days are entire days where you get there at 7 in the morning. You may leave around 2-3 p.m. So it can be a long day, and to feel like you have to be really on and saying all the right things, especially if you're more of an introvert and that's not your thing and people drain you, that's okay. But just recognize that, for that one day, it is really important to try and just put all your energy towards that. And if you need to take a nap afterwards, then absolutely go for it. But again, people are watching you, unfortunately, the entire day, and it's not in a way to weed you out. It's not to scrutinize you. Like Dashae said, you absolutely belong in that interview, and you absolutely belong in that program if they've chosen to interview you. And if you've reached the interview stage, that's an incredible feat. But just to recognize that it's supposed to be an exciting time, so just show them that you're excited to be there. Okay, I'm going to go way back. So we've talked a lot about the interview, but what did you do in the process of the admission cycle of applying and researching the schools, which then also gets into helping you to prepare for that interview?
So honestly, just really stalking the program's website and PTCAST website. There's a lot of information on both of those sites that will help you with figuring out where you want to apply. So that was very helpful, and student experiences were also very helpful. Just seeing like how their first semester went or their second semester went, and just seeing how it really was to be a student and the culture of the program.
Yeah. I created like a spreadsheet, so you can use Microsoft Excel. You can go online to Google Drive. So if you type in drive.google.com, you can create a spreadsheet there. And that's really nice because then it updates it across all of your devices, and it'll save it. If you click out and something happens with your laptop, you can always access it later. But what I did was create columns by the name of the school, the location, the tuition fees, and all other fees, which you can usually find out through the website or their admissions committee if you contact them. I put in how long of a program it was, because there are some programs that are 2 years and not 3. I put in whether it was a hybrid type program where you don't do as much on site, or if it's full-time or part-time. I put in sort of what sort of opportunities are available in the area. So what sort of volunteering opportunities are there, what fun things there are to do. That's really important, I think, is your entire life is not school. Yes, it's a priority, but your life goes on, and it's important to keep up with stress relievers throughout that entire time, including throughout the admissions process. But having that spreadsheet really helped me out a lot. Sometimes I wrote down names of faculty in that spreadsheet if I felt like it was important to remember that. So anything that I felt like I could forget later on, I put into that spreadsheet. I probably had around 20 schools in that spreadsheet, but however many you put in there is absolutely up to you. And to use that to organize myself helped a lot. And one of the major things that I put in that spreadsheet were the prerequisites prerequisites for that program because they vary quite a bit across programs. There were some schools that I would have had to take another 3 or 4 classes before even being able to apply. There were some programs where I already had all the necessary prerequisites to apply. And if you have to take more classes, that's okay. If that's a program that you really want to go to and that's important to you, then you should go for it and don't let that hold you back. But just keep in mind that that may come up. And when you do apply, sometimes there are certain things that you don't have to have submitted by the time of your application or by the time of your interview. Sometimes that can include letters of recommendation, your GRE scores, and including classes. Sometimes you can have a couple of outstanding prerequisite classes, meaning classes that you haven't yet completed or that you're in the middle of. But just be sure that you absolutely know what the case is for every program so that you don't have your application denied for something that was easily preventable and easily researched. And I know we keep saying PTCAS really fast, and I noted that it was a centralized application service, but that's PTCAS. I believe the website is ptcas.org, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But if you Google PTCAS, it will come up, and you'll need to create an account. And be very careful to note the personal statement on there. Every application will have one personal statement that goes out to every program. So one, make sure that you don't write such a specific personal statement to one program to where you put the name of that program in there, because if you're not applying early decision, meaning it's not binding, and it goes to multiple schools, it may look strange if the school that you didn't mean to, whose name is not in the application, for them to receive it. But also to just make sure that you fill out all parts of the application. Make sure you know kind of going in whether you're applying early decision or not. And that's a decision that you can definitely change before you hit submit. But that is where you'll indicate it is within the PTCAS application. And there are a lot of things in there that you can start doing, like putting in some of your transcripts, putting in, your name, your demographic information, that doesn't take a lot of brain power necessarily, and that you can kind of get done early. So PTCAS can be kind of a beast, and it definitely is a couple month-long process, at least it was for me. So to go ahead and get that sort of low-hanging fruit out of the way can be beneficial later on when you're working on the more in-depth type things like the essay. There will also be supplemental essays, and meaning extra essays beyond the personal statement, and that will vary by school. So the different schools, you'll have to write different essays for them, likely. Some schools may not have any additional essays, and that's great, but some may, and some schools may have 5 or 6 questions that you have to answer in short answer form. So just be ready, give yourself enough time. Be sure to take the GRE 2 months out from your application if you can, just because it takes about 4 weeks to process those scores. So just little things like that, a spreadsheet or a planner or schedule can really keep you on task, and make sure that you're absolutely prepared to hit submit on that really exciting day that you get to apply to PT school.
Yeah. And one thing I would say is to not try to do your whole PTCAS application in one day, because that's one thing I try to do, and it really burned me out. So just knowing that you can take your time and you can do a little bit one week and a little bit another week, because you want to put your best information on the application. So just taking your time and knowing that you don't have to do it in one sitting, like you can spread it out.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our admissions and interview day tips. I know I noted that we both have blogs, so we will be linking to both of our blogs if you'd like more information on anything that we've spoken about. But we're really excited for you, and we know it's going to go great. Good luck.